let me be direct with you. A possible understanding between the United States and Iran would not simply be another diplomatic file in Washington, Tehran, or Jerusalem. It could become one of those moments where the strategic map of the Middle East begins to change before most people fully understand what has happened. For months, the region has been shaped by confrontation, pressure, military signals, political warnings, economic strain, and the constant possibility that one miscalculation could widen into something far more dangerous. Iran, the United States, and Israel have stood at the center of that tension. And now, according to reports and diplomatic sources, Washington and Tehran appear to be exploring a new framework of understanding. That is not a small development, because when the United States changes the way it deals with Iran, the consequences do not stop with Iran. They move through the entire region. They affect Israel's security calculations, the choices of Arab governments, the posture of global powers, the confidence of energy markets, and the future balance of influence in the Middle East. And that is why the central question is not simply whether Washington and Tehran can reduce tensions. The deeper question is what happens to Israel if they do. Here's what makes this genuinely consequential. Israel and Iran have not treated each other as ordinary political rivals. Their conflict has been built around influence, intelligence operations, military capability, regional alliances, ideological competition, and competing visions for the future of the Middle East. For decades, Israel has viewed Iran as one of the most serious strategic challenges it faces. At the same time, the United States has remained Israel's closest major partner, while also moving through repeated cycles of confrontation, negotiation, pressure, and limited diplomatic engagement with Tehran. That has always created a difficult balance. Washington has tried to support Israel, contain Iranian ambitions, manage regional crisis, and avoid a wider war at the same time. That balance is never simple. So when reports emerge of a possible U.S.-Iran understanding, Israeli leaders, security officials, and political analysts immediately begin asking what such an arrangement would mean in practice. Would it reduce the risk of a regional conflict? Would it give governments more room to manage crisis? Or would it ease pressure on Iran without resolving the deeper strategic concerns that have shaped Israeli policy for years? Supporters of diplomacy argue that communication between Washington and Tehran could reduce uncertainty and make escalation less likely. Their position is that agreements, even imperfect ones, can create channels for crisis management. They believe that a diplomatic framework gives governments tools other than force, pressure, and retaliation. That is the logic of restraint. But inside parts of Israel's political and security establishment, the concern is different. The worry is that any arrangement with Iran must contain strict safeguards, credible enforcement, and clear consequences if commitments are not honored. Without those mechanisms, critics believe that diplomacy could create a false sense of stability, while deeper risks continue to build beneath the surface. This is not a new Israeli concern. Leaders across different political camps have long approached negotiations involving Iran with caution. Their views on tactics may differ, but the underlying issue remains the same. Any agreement involving Tehran must be judged not by its language alone, but by how it changes the balance of power. That is the real test for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his government. This creates a difficult strategic calculation. Israel's relationship with the United States remains a pillar of its foreign policy. But Israeli leaders also have domestic political pressures, military assessments, intelligence judgments, and long-standing security concerns that cannot simply be set aside because diplomacy is advancing elsewhere. This is where alliances become complicated. Even when two governments remain close, they do not always see the same risks in the same way. Washington may view a U.S.-Iran understanding as a way to reduce instability. Jerusalem may view the same process as something that must be watched with extreme caution. Both positions can exist at the same time. Now, I want to be precise here. The debate inside Israel will likely grow sharper as more details become available. Some voices will argue for maintaining a strong security posture no matter what diplomatic progress occurs. Others may argue that a changing regional environment requires reassessment, flexibility, and a careful search for new opportunities. That debate matters because Israel's decisions will not happen in isolation. Arab governments across the region are also watching closely. Some may welcome a reduction in U.S.-Iran tensions if they believe it lowers the risk of wider instability. Others may hesitate, waiting to see whether any understanding is implemented seriously or whether old rivalries simply return under a different diplomatic language. This uncertainty is why the moment could become transformative. The implications are not only military or diplomatic, they are also economic. The Middle East remains central to global energy supplies, trade, corridors, shipping routes, investment confidence, and broader economic stability. When tensions rise, markets react. When conflict appears more likely, investors become cautious. When diplomatic engagement creates predictability, economic activity can become easier to sustain. That is why Europe, Asia, and other global actors are paying attention. Stability in the Middle East affects energy security, trade flows, migration pressures, financial confidence, and international diplomacy far beyond the region's borders. The consequences rarely remain local. Still, no serious analyst should pretend that diplomacy automatically resolves the deeper disputes. Agreements do not erase decades of rivalry overnight. They create a structure for managing disagreements. Their success depends on implementation, monitoring, political will, and the ability of governments to sustain commitments after the headlines fade. That is where the next phase becomes more important than the announcement. If diplomatic engagement continues and reduces tension, many governments would welcome a more predictable regional environment. But if disputes emerge over enforcement, interpretation, or political intent, the region could quickly enter a new cycle of strategic friction. The Middle East has repeatedly shown that assumptions can be overturned very quickly. The Middle East stands at a historic crossroads. Decisions made in the coming years may reshape the region's strategic landscape for decades, influencing not only regional security, but also the broader balance of global power. For Israel, the challenge is particularly significant. Israeli policymakers are increasingly confronted with a rapidly changing environment that no longer operates according to the assumptions that guided previous generations. The question is no longer simply how to maintain military superiority or respond to immediate threats. Instead, it has become a much larger strategic challenge. How to preserve essential national interests while adapting to an emerging regional order that is more complex, more interconnected, and far less predictable than before. The United States faces its own difficult balancing act. Washington must simultaneously maintain its long-standing partnership with Israel, pursue diplomatic objectives with Iran, reassure traditional Arab partners, safeguard global energy markets, and protect broader American strategic interests. Each of these priorities often pulls policy in different directions. The result is an increasingly complicated diplomatic environment where every decision carries consequences that extend far beyond a single bilateral relationship. In this new reality, American policymakers are tasked with managing competing interests in a region that remains one of the most strategically important areas on Earth. Iran, meanwhile, faces a different set of challenges. Any diplomatic breakthrough between Tehran and Washington would immediately generate expectations both domestically and internationally. Regional rivals would closely examine whether Iran's commitments are genuine. International observers would assess whether diplomacy can deliver tangible results. At home, political factions would debate whether engagement serves the country's long-term interests. Success would bring opportunities, but it would also bring scrutiny, obligations, and pressure. Consequently, any agreement is not the conclusion of a story. It is merely the beginning of a new chapter. Yet, beneath these headline developments lies an even more significant question. If the Middle East is entering a new era, who will shape the future balance of power? This question fundamentally alters how we should understand the region's transformation. Increasingly, the answer involves not only regional actors, but also major global powers whose influence continues to expand. Among them, China and Russia occupy particularly important positions. Today's Middle East differs dramatically from the region that existed even a decade ago. Traditional alliances still matter, and long-standing rivalries continue to influence strategic calculations. Security concerns remain powerful drivers of decision-making. However, alongside these familiar dynamics, new forces are emerging. Economic integration, technological development, infrastructure investment, digital connectivity, and evolving diplomatic priorities are creating an increasingly complex regional order that cannot be understood through old frameworks alone. For much of the modern era, the United States occupied a uniquely dominant position across the Middle East. American military power, diplomatic influence, security guarantees, economic partnerships, and energy policies allowed Washington to shape many of the region's defining outcomes. From conflict management and peace initiatives to military alliances and energy security, the United States often served as the central external actor whose decisions carried enormous weight. That influence has not disappeared. The United States remains a major military and diplomatic presence throughout the region. Its security partnerships continue to play a critical role in regional stability. However, many analysts increasingly describe the Middle East as becoming multipolar. Rather than one dominant external power setting the rules, multiple major powers are now competing, cooperating, and pursuing overlapping interests simultaneously. China represents perhaps the most significant example of this transformation. Unlike traditional powers whose influence often depended on military alliances, Beijing has largely focused on economics as the foundation of its regional strategy. Trade, infrastructure development, technological cooperation, industrial investment, and long-term economic partnerships have become the primary tools through which China has expanded its influence. Over the past 2 decades, Beijing has steadily deepened relationships with countries across the Middle East, regardless of their political systems or regional rivalries. The logic behind this strategy is straightforward. China is one of the world's largest consumers of energy. Making stable relationships with energy-producing nations essential to its economic future. Yet energy is only part of the equation. The Middle East occupies one of the most strategically important geographic locations in the world. It serves as a bridge connecting Asia, Africa, and Europe. Major shipping routes, transportation corridors, digital infrastructure networks, and investment pathways pass through the region. For China, whose long-term vision depends on expanding global connectivity, maintaining a strong presence in the Middle East is not merely beneficial. It is strategically necessary. One of Beijing's greatest advantages lies in its ability to maintain relationships with multiple competing actors simultaneously. Rather than choosing sides in many regional disputes, China has generally sought to engage all parties through economic cooperation. This approach allows Beijing to present itself primarily as a partner for development and investment while avoiding direct involvement in some of the region's most sensitive political conflicts. This strategy has yielded significant results. Chinese investment projects, transportation initiatives, telecommunications partnerships, industrial developments, and trade agreements have expanded throughout the region. Over time, these economic relationships become more than commercial transactions. They evolve into channels of political influence, strategic leverage, and long-term partnerships that shape regional decision-making. Russia has pursued a different but equally important path. Moscow's influence in the Middle East is more closely tied to security cooperation, military engagement, diplomatic intervention, and strategic partnerships. Over the past decade, Russia has demonstrated a willingness to become actively involved in regional conflicts and security arrangements, positioning itself as a power that cannot be ignored when major regional decisions are made. For Russia, the Middle East serves several strategic purposes. It provides opportunities to project power beyond its immediate neighborhood, reinforces Moscow's image as a major global actor, creates economic opportunities through energy cooperation and defense exports, and provides additional leverage in broader international negotiations. These objectives make regional engagement an important component of Russia's global strategy. Operating successfully in the Middle East, however, requires navigating extraordinary complexity. The region contains overlapping alliances, competing interests, sectarian divisions, political rivalries, economic competition, and security concerns. Maintaining influence requires careful diplomacy and constant adaptation. Russia has sought to achieve this by maintaining communication with a wide range of regional governments, even when those governments hold opposing interests. Both China and Russia are responding to a reality that older geopolitical models struggle to explain. In previous decades, discussions about power often focused primarily on military alliances and ideological competition. Today, economic connectivity, technology, supply chains, investment flows, digital infrastructure, and industrial development are increasingly central to geopolitical influence. Power is no longer measured solely by military capability. It is also measured by the ability to build networks, shape markets, control technology, and influence economic development. The Middle East sits at the center of all these trends. Its geographic position connects major global markets. Its energy resources remain essential to the world economy. Its infrastructure projects attract significant international investment. Its political stability influences global security. These realities ensure that competition among external powers will remain a defining feature of the region for years to come. Importantly, the rise of a multipolar Middle East does not mean traditional alliances are disappearing. Rather, regional governments are diversifying their relationships. Many states increasingly seek partnerships with multiple major powers simultaneously. They may maintain security cooperation with the United States, expand trade with China, engage Russia on strategic issues, and cooperate with Europe in technology, education, and finance. This is not inconsistency, it is strategic flexibility. Governments across the region are seeking to maximize opportunities while minimizing dependence on any single external actor. They want investment, technological advancement, security guarantees, economic growth, and diplomatic options. In an interconnected world, national interests often require cooperation across traditional political boundaries. This diversification creates opportunities, but it also introduces new complexities. Infrastructure investments can generate strategic influence. Technology partnerships can shape future security systems. Energy cooperation can become a source of geopolitical leverage. Economic relationships increasingly carry political implications. As more powers compete for influence, decision-making becomes more complicated for every government involved. The energy sector provides a clear example of these dynamics. Although renewable technologies continue to expand globally, traditional energy resources remain vital to the international economy. Many Middle Eastern states are simultaneously pursuing ambitious economic diversification programs aimed at reducing dependence on hydrocarbons. Manufacturing, finance, logistics, tourism, technology, and advanced industries are becoming increasingly important components of national development strategies. China has emerged as a significant partner in many of these modernization efforts. Russia continues to play a role in energy cooperation and strategic engagement. Western countries remain important providers of investment, innovation, financial systems, education, and advanced technology. The result is a highly interconnected environment in which influence is built through multiple channels simultaneously. Technology has become another critical arena of competition. Artificial intelligence, telecommunications networks, cybersecurity, digital infrastructure, advanced manufacturing, and data systems are now central elements of national power. Governments throughout the Middle East recognize this reality and are investing heavily in modernization initiatives. External powers capable of providing expertise, technology, capital, and market access naturally gain influence as these transformations unfold. Despite their rivalries, major powers share certain common interests: stable energy markets, secure shipping routes, functioning economies, and the avoidance of large-scale regional conflict benefit nearly everyone. These shared interests create opportunities for limited cooperation even among competitors whose broader strategic goals may differ significantly. Viewed through this broader lens, any potential understanding between the United States and Iran becomes part of a much larger transformation rather than an isolated diplomatic event. Such developments occur within a region where alliances are evolving, economic relationships are expanding, and external powers are competing for influence through new methods. China and Russia closely monitor these developments because greater stability can create opportunities for trade, infrastructure investment, and economic engagement. Conversely, renewed instability increases uncertainty and risk for all parties involved. Public expectations across the region also play a growing role. Increasingly, populations expect governments to deliver economic opportunity, technological advancement, higher living standards, and long-term development. Security remains essential, but prosperity has become equally important. external powers capable of contributing to these goals often